standard above par. I'm asking the HART board to make a responsible decision this morning. Do what is fiscally responsible and ask for Grabowskis' resignation. If he refuses, fire him immediately. He should not have any further hand in the rail project. You are obviously struggling with his performance as well, since you have spent so many hours examining it. Any comments or questions?
Thank you very much, Mr. Friedman. Members, any questions for Mr. Friedman?
Can I make a comment?
Yes.
Mr. Friedman, thank you for your testimony. I just want you to know one thing. We were in constant communication with the FTA, and we were not given any heads up that the letter was coming, dated July 21st. So we didn't know that in hindsight, the award would be 2 or 3 days before the letter arrived. And I think there was no reason that the FTA could not have communicated to us that they were going to be sending a letter and perhaps even the content of the letter, but they did not do that. And so when the letter came, it was unfortunately 2 or 3 days after the decision had been made to award the contract. But I appreciate your comments. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Members, any other questions or comments? Thank you very much, Mr. Friedman.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you for participating. Anyone else? Mr. Anthony.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Anthony.
Members of the board, Chair, Mr. Grabowskis. I intend to speak this morning in keeping with the rules that you have established that members of the public may speak to each agenda item. So I presume that the previous speaker was addressing one of the agenda items that deal with the subject of the cost overruns and the letters of exchange between the mayor and FDA. So I want to confine myself to that issue. This is not the time to be asking for yet another resignation. I stand here as a member of the public who supports this project and who has consistently supported it over the last 4 or 5 years at least. It is easy to come before the members of a board such as this and ask for somebody's head on a platter. Quite frankly, I consider that kind of an approach to be indecent in these circumstances. This is not the time for recrimination. This is not the time for finger pointing. This is not the time to ask for more resignations. I have confidence in Mr. Grabowskis. He's made some mistakes. He's made some mistakes, maybe not on the same scale as Hillary Clinton has made mistakes, and that was the subject of an enormous amount of discussion and debate at the DNC yesterday and the day before. We all make mistakes. We can go over the record with respect to how it was that these cost overruns came to be and why it was that all of the people who ought to have been in on monitoring this did not monitor it in time. I think the record shows that the FDA, which doled out more than $1 billion of taxpayers' money, does not on any kind of regular basis. My most recent information is that the FDA doesn't even attend these meetings. I think that is an indication of remarkable insensitivity, and it sends a signal that the FDA is not seriously interested in the day-to-day operations, particularly that come out in public at meetings such as this. So I want to emphasize and underscore this. I do not support the matter placed before you by the previous speaker that Dan Grabowskis should have resigned. He ought not to. His resignation was already sought by the ranking member of the City Council, and he has chosen not to resign. He ought not to. He should stand his ground and you, as members of this board, have an obligation to deal with him fairly and to consider his services in the context of its quality over the last, how long have you been here, 3 years?
4 years.
4 years. So I want to send that as a clear signal. I stand here in support of Dan Grabauskas. There are course corrections that he should make. There are amendments that he should make to the way he handles his job. I'm sure that he's open to that, and there is a good place and a good time for those kinds of issues to surface and to be discussed within the confines of reason. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Members, any questions of Mr. Anthony? No? Thank you very much.
I'm disappointed. No questions.
No questions.
Thank you, Mr. Formby.
Any other members of the public? Yes. Mr. Homa.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning to board
morning.
members. First of all, I'd like to congratulate Council Member Henry Felix. Welcome to the board. I remember when he was a council member in 1990. He was working hard for the rail project back then. And so I'm sure he knows what the ramification of this project is all about. So I'm just here, I just want to let you guys know that I noticed that mayor's election coming up and all that. So as an independent HART board member, I want you guys to be more independent. Don't get influenced because the mayor's election's coming up. You got to do what's right for Honolulu, what's Pono here. So make sure that all those speculations number that they came up by coming up to the middle street, those are speculated numbers. So I just want to make sure that when you guys proceed this project, going in a tone that you guys gonna willing to cut costs, willing to oversee this project and make sure that things are done correctly. And it's a good time to master plan this project as well, where you can build the infrastructure needs throughout the station. As you know, the governor is talking about the affordable housing around the alignment, taking care of the homelesses, developing the infrastructure needs. I think it's a good time that if you guys can work together with the community's needs and wants. And even with the TOD, the transit-oriented development, I know that we're trying to get more investors to cooperate and coming up with a feasible plan for the transit-oriented development throughout the surrounding the train station along the alignment. So, you know, it's a good way of bringing things in perspective now, because I know the community and the people are looking at this project more closely and being scrutinized here. So I just want to make sure the board understands that. I'm sure you guys are looking for all these alternative ways to making this project successful. So I think it's a time now that everybody needs to work together and proceed from that angle. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions of Mr. Homa? Oh, thank you very much. Anyone else? Mr. Kahele. By the way, we all know who you are, but can you begin by stating your name and who you represent? Okay.
Thank you, Chair. Mel Kahele. I'm with the Ironworkers Local 625, also a resident of Kapolei for over 44 years. I'm the one that's stuck in traffic almost every day. Well, school starts in about a week, so it all starts all over again. You know, congratulations, Mr. Felix, or maybe condolences. But, you know, I know there's an evaluation coming up for Mr. Grabauskas. I've stated on the record on several occasions that, you know, whenever we needed questions answered, he was there. Whenever we wanted to meet with him, he always came out. And not requiring us to come here, but he came out in the country to meet with us. So I hope the board makes that right decision. He got us this far, you know, let him complete it. When we voted in 2008, it was for a 20-mile, 21-station, steel-on-steel, elevated rail system. And, you know, with all this political maneuvering going on with the mayor's race, you know, I'm not going to mention names of who the candidates are. You all are aware of who's running. Hopefully that doesn't undermine this project. I know we all took an oath of office, and I was happy to be here when Mr. Felix accepted his oath, and you know, that there would be, he would discharge his duty impartially. there is a question, I believe, on one of the board members that's currently here. And I won't mention his name, but I will mention his position as the vice chair. You know, I don't believe any board member should be coming out there publicly and undermining this rail project. Both of us come from the House of Labor. I've been involved in the labor movement for over 44 years, and I believe we disagree with the positions that he's taken. I'm not sure if there's an ethical issue here, but you all took a moral responsibility when you guys became board members. Let's get this rail completed. I know there's a difference between the gentleman in the back of me that wants his project to stop, but yeah, we've invested too much money. You know, the ironworkers spent hundreds of thousands of dollars to get this project going. And I'm pretty sure the other unions also spent a lot of money to get this project going, besides the private sector out there. So, with that being said, I would hope whatever candidate that we decide on picking for the mayor, let's keep it between us. I don't think the board members should be going out there and criticizing other individuals and criticizing this project. With that being said, thank you very much, Chair Hanabusa.
Thank you, Mr. Kahele. Any questions or comments?
Yes,
members?
I do.
Mr. Kim.
First of all, Mr. Kahele, thank you, but everybody knows who you're talking about because I am the vice chair of the board.
Yes.
And everybody had probably seen commercials and stuff. But if you notice in any statements, whether it be on TV or in print, I have not spoken anything on the rail. I have not said anything on the candidate regarding rail. I sit on the board and I am independent of whoever is mayor. My job is to make sure this rail is done properly and done responsibly. And if we can get it to Ala Moana, that's what we want to do, is get it to Ala Moana. Now the board also decided that there are other ways to look at, and that was decided by the board to see what other means to get to Ala Moana. So just to remind you that it was discussed here at the board level prior to all this election about where to take this rail, how to get it there, and how to keep it under budget, or not under budget, but under the big estimates that we have right now, yeah.
Thank you, Damien. And if I may, Damien, I'm not here to get into a debate with anyone, but we all know what position each candidate is taking. And the position that an individual out there is taking is not to continue this rail project. And for us to now put it on street level, the whole scenario about going through a new environmental impact statement will take years. Cost is going up in the event we do decide. But, I respect you highly, Damien. You and I come from the House of Labor for many years. But I would hope that we'll be able to keep our comments to ourselves as being a member of this board and look out for the best interests of the people that needs this rail project and needs this alternative to get into Honolulu. I'm not sure where all of you live. I live on the west side. Many of us live on the west side. I ran for city council several years ago so I could push for this rail project and see what we can do to help our people that lives in our end. So I appreciate your comment, Damien. Thank you very much. If no more questions.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments from the members? Thank you, Mr. Kahele. Thank you very
Chair.
much. Anyone else from the audience who would like to make a comment on any of the agenda items? If not, members, we will be moving on to item number 4, which is the approval of the minutes of the June 16, 2016 meeting of the Board of Directors. Members, I would recommend that we defer this approval because if anybody has read it, you know that we're looking at almost 20 pages, I think. And personally, I myself have not had the opportunity to look at the minutes, so I'd like to defer it. Any objections to the deferral? Hearing none, members, we will defer the approval of the minutes of the June 16, 2016 Board of Directors meeting to the next regularly scheduled board meeting. Item number 5. This is the Executive Director and CEO's performance evaluation and upcoming performance objectives. Members, the board may enter into executive session pursuant to Hawaii Revised Statutes 92-4 and subsection 92-5A4 And this section reads, to consult with its attorneys on questions and issues pertaining to the board's powers, duty, privileges, immunities, and liabilities. And 92-5A2, which is to consult to consider the hire, evaluation, dismissal, or discipline of an officer and employee, or of charges brought against the officers or employee where considerations of matters affecting privacy will be involved. Members, I would entertain a motion to that effect to go into executive session.
So moved.
I have two moves. One, will you be second?
Second.
Okay. Moved by Member Formby, seconded by Vice Chair Kim. Members, any discussion? If not, do we have unanimous consent to go into executive session? Thank you. We are in executive session. Thank you. We are back in session. As you know, we went to an executive session on item 5 of the agenda. We will be reconvening on this matter on August 8 at 8:30 in the morning. We're moving on to item number 6, committee membership and leadership. Given the fact that John Henry Felix has now joined us, I would also like to make the following appointments, and as you know, committee membership and appointments are the discretion of the chair. So, Ms. Cherry Fujii, because she's not here, will be the next chair of finance, and we would like to ask John Henry to serve as our vice chair. That's all right. Also, in transit-oriented development, we now have, of course, William Hong, Buzzy as the chair. I'd like to ask Terry Lee if he will serve as vice chair. So with that, you also have George Atta and Michael Formby. We have, that's an odd number, that's an even number. Is there anyone else who would like to serve on TODs? Anyone wants to volunteer on TODs, transit-oriented developments?
For now then.
How about, okay?
Yeah.
So the other member we will be adding on so that we would have an odd number will be Damian Kim, the vice chair. So Terry will be vice chair and Damian Kim will join as a member. Human resources are fine. On project oversight, I know that John Henry has expressed an interest in project oversight, so I will remove myself from project oversight and put John Henry on to project oversight. And of course, Michael Formby remains as chair and Damian Kim as vice chair. And Colbert Matsumoto is also on that committee. Government Affairs, Audit, and Legal Matters, Terry Lee is the chair. For right now, we will leave that, that committee. I will move Michael Formby to vice chair just because there's a puka, and I will remain as a member. So is there if anyone else is interested in government affairs or legal matters, please speak up. Oh, John Henry Felix. Great. So John Henry Felix will also go on that. Is there anyone else who would be interested in that committee? It's kind of at 4 now. I think George Atta should go on that committee. Thank you, George.
You're welcome.
Okay. So with that, members, we have finished the committee membership and leadership. Correct, Cynthia? Mm-hmm. Okay. Now we're going to move on to agenda item number 7. This is Resolution 2016-19, authorizing the transfer of funds from the Honolulu High Capacity Transit Project to the HART Project Adjustment Account, and the transfer of funds from the HART Project Adjustment Account for the Airport Section Guideway and Station Group Project in the Honolulu Authority for Rapid Transportation capital budget for fiscal year July 1, 2016 to June 30th, 2017. Members, if you recall, the Honolulu City Council, when they did the budget of HART, created caps and on certain projects. And it's my understanding that this is to authorize the transfer of funds from one of the buckets of funds so that the Airport Section Guideway, the ASG contract, can issue. But with that, Nicole?
Nicole Chapman, for the record, Director of Procurement and Contracts for HART. Chair Hanabusa actually summarized that very well. I was going to give you the summary, but so this is HART staff seeking HART board's approval to submit to City Council resolution authorizing the transfer of $54,750,000 from the budget ordinance appropriations category called Honolulu High Capacity Transit Project to the project adjustments account, and from project adjustments account to the Airport Guideway and Stations Project.
Members, does anyone have any questions about this? Nicole, I have one, and that is you're moving almost exactly the amount of money you need. The difference between, I believe, what was capped by City Council to what I assume is the amount of the Airport Guideway contract. Do you think it may be more prudent to ask for a little bit more funds? Because it's just going into that account, but it's only a certain amount that's coming out.
I was reading the City Council Budget Ordinance 1617, and we did contemplate that as well. The language specifically when it talks about moving money out of project adjustments account says for any excess in contract price when the contract price exceeds the estimate of the project, and the estimate of the project was at $820 million. And I guess that does raise the question about that whether HART has authority, and I believe we do, to use our contingency funds if we do need to, if there is a change order and we do need to use additional funds.
Okay. Do you have a Michael Formby?
Yeah, I wanted to get information about the timing. So I don't think the board's ever received information about how the contract was awarded, and I always assumed that it was a conditional award subject to the availability of funds. But can you tell us more about the timing? What time period do we have to process first this reso, and then a reso through council, and then full council meeting?
Right.
Do we have all the rights to retain the price that we accepted?
I will defer to Joyce to speak to the process, but I wanted to clarify on how the award was made. The award was made with a certification of partial funding, which is allowed under Hawaii administrative rules to do that. So the award was not made with certification of full funding, and that can only happen once the resolution is approved by City Council. So that's how the award was made. Currently, the contract is awarded for $820 million, which was what was appropriated under Ordinance 1617. So if that answers the question about the award, I'll have Joyce speak to the process and the timeline.
Thank you. Joyce Oliveira, Director of Government Relations. So as you've, board member, outlined, the council, following receipt of a resolution to be introduced by a council member, they would, yes, take it to committee, go to full council, and there's a question as to whether or not this board would like the HART administration to then come back to the board, similar to the budget process that you have in place presently for board action. So those would be the steps that would be required for this measure to move forward, at least for purposes of our procurement team.
And Joyce, if a matter were approved today and then at the earliest moment the council then acted, how soon could they turn around that resolution and return something to the board, do you think?
Right, so their timeline, assume that, of course, that they have control over their budget. Their next regularly scheduled committee, this matter would normally go to the Budget Committee, and that would be the week of August 23rd, 24th, to 25th. So budget meets Wednesday, that would be the 24th. And then September, the second full week of September would be the council's budget meeting. Wednesday, it lands on a Wednesday, I believe the 6th.
So just so that we're clear, Joyce, there was always the issue of how valid or long that bid could be held at that amount. So are we within the time frame? Because this is a resolution. So are we going to be within the time frame?
We are going to be in the time frame, yes.
Assuming that the action takes place in September and then comes back to the
That's
September
right.
board.
That's correct, yes.
Any other questions, members? If not, so we do need board action on this, we have to pass on the resolution. Given that, are there any members of the public who would first like to testify on this specific item on the agenda before we go to a vote? Seeing no one, may I, go ahead. This item. Okay. Members, given that, anyone, Mike?
So Chair, I'll make the motion, and I also want to just acknowledge the chair because she was at the council hearing where, at the budget committee hearing where she actually requested that we have the right to come back and move funds between buckets of money so that we could cover this contract, not knowing what the amount would be at the time. So I'll make the motion to support that. Thank you.
Second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Kim. Members, any discussion? If not, then do we have unanimous consent? And this, of course, is the motion to authorize the resolution 2016-19. Okay, we have unanimous consent. Thank you very much. Next is item number 8, the mayor's June 24, 2016 letter to the Federal Transit Administration and the Federal Transit Administration's response regarding HART's recovery plan. Sam.
Yes,
Welcome
Chair.
back, Sam.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Sam Carnaggio. I'm the project director. This letter back from the FTA was addressed to Mayor Caldwell at the direction of Mr. Grabowskis. I've done the follow-up on it, but I've been working closely with Director Formby in responding back to this. I can tell you that in their letter, they have requested that we meet with them before the end of August to discuss our plans to develop a schedule of milestones and deliverables to be able to develop a recovery plan. In HART, we have been working on different options as directed by the board that are what you might call viable options based on the funds that we have right now. And we've just about completed narrowing down the options as far as cost go. We've now directed staff to develop ridership numbers because that's critical to the plan that we put forward. And they're working on that and hope to have it in the next week and a half. In the next week and a half, the FTA's PMO is coming on board, and we'll review that with them at that time. And then based on their feedback, we'll be prepared to make a recommendation to the board here. I should tell you also that part of the letter says that they want to meet with us. It's addressed to the mayor, of course, before the end of August. Yesterday morning, I had a conversation with the FTA regional administrator in San Francisco to firm this up a little bit. He likes our progress to date. I related a number of the activities to him. He wants, of course, to meet before the end of August, hopefully, he said, in the 3rd or 4th week. He would like the city to form a delegation
and his expectation that it would be people from HART, and then whoever the administration and this council chooses. So obviously that has to be determined, and also his request to meet in San Francisco. Based on that discussion and what he sees, they'll give us feedback, and they are requesting a report from us by the end of September.
Are you done with your report, Sam?
Yes, ma'am.
Members, do you have any questions?
Chair, just
Yes.
one question.
Terry.
Sam, you probably weren't here, but this morning, before we went into executive session, a member of the public criticized HART for awarding the airport segment contract.
Yes, sir.
In light of the letter from dated July 21st, where they cautioned us to be careful about actions that might prejudice. Did your discussion with the FTA touch on any of that?
To a degree, they asked, obviously we awarded before the letter
Right.
came in, and they did ask the question if we did award it, and what were the implications of that, and I told them that we were obviously interested in making the award as soon as possible. To be honest with you, we thought that it was very clear to them ahead of time. And if they had this concern, we would have expected they would have warned us ahead of time before the bids came in. In the time that the bids were being evaluated, they made no communication such as that to us. So we felt very comfortable with what we were doing and making the award when we did.
But were they concerned about it at all?
Not, I wouldn't say concerned, they asked the questions. And then they asked what was our intent with regards to the notice to proceed, because that's the next step. And I said that we had no immediate plans. Of course, we would have a discussion with the board ahead of time and some of the implications, obviously, that are in the letter. And he seemed well satisfied with that.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Mr. Formby.
Thank you, Chair. Sam, with respect to the NTP date, because we have the reso that needs to go before council for full funding, is NTP tied to that, or could we issue NTP in advance of the full funding resolution through council?
We, of course, could do it before then, but until the reso, we wouldn't be able to do it anytime before, I guess, the middle to the end of September. But obviously, based on their communications, they would want us to communicate with them about our actions going forward.
Okay, so meaning you would give them a heads up as far as intent to issue NTP before issuing it?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Members, any other questions? So Sam, when they said the FDA cautions the city and county to refrain from any procurement or other actions that would foreclose viable options for maximizing project benefits or prejudice FDA's decisions on a recovery plan, was it your sense that they felt that the airport segment, the award, was one that could fall into this, for lack of a better description, this warning that they're giving us not to do it?
I don't take it as a warning. I take it as an advisement.
Okay,
I think
advisement.
that they want us to consider all options. I think once we go to them with our options and show how that's affected or not affected, and personally I don't think it is affected, then I think they'll be fine with it.
But they were asking us technically not to take any kind of major, because, you know, we're talking about an $875 million contract.
Correct.
So I would assume that that's something that they were concerned about, because that does affect options, if that money were to be used in some other way.
Yes, that's fair.
Thank you very much. But, and you also did say something else which I'm curious about. You said that they really liked our progress, or something to that effect.
Yes, they like the fact that we're proceeding with the options, and then we're taking seriously that any option we have, we're going to determine the ridership on it and come back to them with the impact of certain decisions that we make, whether it's the deferral of stations.
How about, have you discussed with them at all how far the line's going to go? The guideway will go?
Not in specifics. We haven't spoken to FTA, no.
Okay. But that would be part of the discussion on the options, would it not?
It definitely would.
So just so that the public's aware and the board knows, how long do you think it'll be before you will be able to provide us with, when I'm saying you, I mean HART staff, will be able to provide the board with an idea as to where we are in terms of the options? Because if the FTA is asking for a meeting by the end of August, that's the end of next, that's about a month away, I would assume that they're expecting to see some kind of option plan at that point.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
And go ahead, and you agree that they're expecting to see something?
Yes, and I expect that we have to provide you as the board information before the 3rd week of August.
That would be our next, our normally scheduled meeting, which would be August 18th.
I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with
Right.
your schedule, but
Well, that's what you're
that would sound
thinking.
right, yes.
So then, so we would be briefed no later than August 18th on what the various options look like?
I think we have to. If we're going to go to FTA, I think we have to share it with you ahead of time before we go to FTA.
Okay.
Can I follow?
Yes, Mr. Foreman.
So the concern I have with that is that if it's an informal discussion, which I always assumed it was from the way it's worded in the letter, I'm okay with that, because anything beyond informal is something that goes through the council and is within the purview of council. So I hope when we talk about discussing options with the FTA end of August, that they understand that that is an informal discussion, and it will probably be, more sophisticated and refined before we take it to council.
I certainly expected that would be it.
Great.
I absolutely agree with you that
Yeah.
I expected that everything in August would be informal, and then we firm everything up. We run it through the administration and council, and we get everybody's buy-in, and then we can submit to them by the end of September. That was my expectation.
Thank you, Sam. I appreciate that.
Sorry, Chair, one other
Yes,
quick.
Mr.
Sam,
Lee.
when you spoke to the regional director about this end of August meeting, and he wanted representatives from council and HART and so on, I mean, what is your personal feeling about maybe the board sending a representative?
I think it's an excellent idea. I would expect nothing less.
Great, thank you.
But that's, you asked for my...
Yeah, no, exactly. No, I want to make sure that, yeah. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Sam, on another separate note, since you're here, when are we going to get an updated 11 by 17? As you and I both know what I'm talking about, public may not know, but it is that, it's Mr. Formby's budget book, and it's my 11 by 17.
As soon as I can get across the table, Chair Hanabusa.
Fine. So it's there so that the board hopefully will be able to see that, and the public will be able to see that shortly.
Yes, but again, it is in draft. We're still working on it because of the reviews that we're doing right now, our risk report. And this is another item that we're going to run past the PMO to get their buy-in next week.
Next week?
The week after that, I'm sorry, I think it's the 8th.
The 8th, the week of the 8th?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
And you'd have a more refined version that would be more, you'd rather circulate, I think, at that point, after we get the PMO to
Yeah.
look at it.
Yes, this
Yes.
is a draft, and then that I'm going to share with Chair Hanabusa and Director Formby, and we'll get feedback, but in the next week and a half, we're continuing to refine it.
Thank you very much. I think that chart was extremely helpful to all of us. So, and I think that the public as well as the members, it's just a lot easier than reading a 160-page progress report. Thank you very much. Any other questions? Not? Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
public testimony on this issue.
There's no action, so we don't
sorry?
take, there's no action to be taken.
I understand there's no action to be taken, but action is proposed, and it might be useful for the board to hear from at least one member of the public on some thoughts regarding this process, which involves extensive communication. Beginning on the 6th of June, there's a letter on the 24th of June, and then a letter, 24th of June letter, which is on your agenda paper, and then there's a July 21st letter from the FDA to the council, and I would like to speak to what I think are important issues concerning how these matters are handled. Because
All right, why don't you come up? Thank you, Sam. So this is on agenda number 8.
That's correct.
Okay.
Agenda item number 8, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Madam Chair, members of the board, I thank you for the flexibility in allowing me to speak to this issue, and particularly since you are, strictly speaking, not taking any action on this item, but I think that intervention by a member of the public, such as I am, and I come specifically this morning to this meeting to speak to this issue. There are 3 critical pieces of information that are in the public domain that I have had access to. There's a letter from the FDA dated the 6th of June, and that letter talks about a deadline to provide certain information, including options, and a recovery plan that was due by the 7th of August, I think. And then, I haven't actually seen that letter, but I've seen references to it. Then there is a letter from the mayor, dated the 24th of June, that sets out a longish timetable and asking for an extension that would reach all the way into June of next year. I want you to know that I have intervened in that matter and sent a letter to the FDA, arguing that length of an extension from the proposed sometime in August of this year to June of next year is far too long of an extension. And my reason is simply this. This is a matter that is urgent insofar as the prospects of completing this project as originally envisioned. I think it should be put on a fast track. And I think that because a fast track underscores urgency, this is a matter that is urgent to this proposal. Now, I also think that, and I feel queasy about this, that when the mayor talks about an extension into June of next year, I cannot resist the temptation to say, well, is the mayor really playing really fair here? Because the schedule seems to be one that is determined more by the process that he is involved in with respect to his re-election, and hence his reason for extending it into June of next year. I think that is a flawed process if the FDA were to accept that. Fortunately, in the letter from the acting administrator of the FDA dated the 21st of July, which I only got a copy, well, I think a copy was sent to me, but I lost it on my computer. And I think that letter sets a more truncated set of deadlines in order to address a number of issues. One is the options that are going to be offered from this side. Number 2, somewhere in the correspondence, there is a question, an important question posed by the FDA. And the FDA says, we know, and as we meaning all of us inclusively know, that there is a known amount of guaranteed income to fund this project. And that figure lies somewhere between 6.3 billion and 6.8, as I understand it. But the fundamental problem is that there is $1 billion plus in the way of a shortfall to carry this project forward to 20 miles and 21 stations. The mayor is committed to that. He's committed to the MOS. 20 miles, 21 stations. I do not think that there is any sentiment on this board, as I read the tea leaves. I'm not very good at this, but as I read the tea leaves, I don't think there is any sentiment on this board at this time about stopping this project at Middle Street. I hope I am correct. So far, in the analysis of options, if you were to do that, that is, stop this project in Middle Street and say, oh, wait a minute, you know, as if you were coming from Tahiti 1,000 years ago on a canoe, and you got into bad weather, and you say, hey, wait a minute, no, we're going to stop over here and wait until the storm goes down. I think stopping this project in Middle Street would be decidedly a very, very bad option. But the FTA wants to know, given the fact that you have an assured income stream of somewhere between 6.3 and 6.8, how far can you take this project? And that answer has not been provided, but I feel very queasy about that, because if you were to take the project only as far as the 6.3, some figure between 6.3 and 6.8 billion, that is dangerous thinking. It leads you into cul-de-sac. So the central question becomes, where do you get the money from to meet the shortfall? And I want to take a stab at that, because I want to stoke your thinking. Because, let me just divert for a minute. The critical parties involved in this process are, one, this board. Number two, the mayor's office. Number three, Ernie Martin and his people at the council level. Number four is the governor. He's part of this process. You know, you don't require a passport to go from the county of Honolulu to the state of Hawaii. We are all one ohana in this matter. And then lastly, there's the legislature. So let me take a stab at some of the options that you have. One is, you could make the 0.5% permanent. But that's embedded in a whole bunch of politics. Number two, you could go to the mayor, and it would require an initiative from this board, not necessarily in public. You know, I mean, we have telephones. Somebody from this board could take an initiative with the mayor and say, you know, Mr. Mayor, you need to indicate some public confidence beside the confidence that you have asserted in terms of your support for this project going 20 miles and 21 stations, by saying that your administration would provide a given sum of money. Well, let me pick one out of the hat. $400 million, I as mayor will beat the bushes and find and contribute towards the deficit, the 1 point whatever it is billion. Somebody, and this is process now, this is what makes me feel uneasy about the previous speaker outlining what the mayor's office will do. Somebody from this board has to take the initiative in doing some back-channel diplomacy with the governor. Somebody's got to talk to them. I will be blunt with you. Kirk Caldwell is not that guy. He's a nice guy. I have some disagreements with him, but I don't think he has the kind of credibility with the ledge. I don't know about the governor, but certainly with the ledge, there's a problem there. So you've got to find another messenger. And then eventually, the money has to come from somewhere. So 0.5% is part of the answer. The other part is from state funds. State will argue that this is a county project. We don't want to be involved. But Chair Hanabusa, you know better than I do how that part of the system works. But all in all, if you take the view that this is a project that is really, really important to Oahu, a 600 square mile island, and to future generations, then some initiative has got to come from somebody on this board in order to work in tandem with the mayor's representative who's handling this matter before the FTA. Because the FTA is not a pawn in this process, it's a major player. And so my argument to you for your consideration is that you need to appoint someone who is going to proactively engage in particularly back-channel diplomacy and bring together factions that sometimes are at war with each other. The mayor's office, Ernie Martin's office. I don't know about the governor's disposition. I don't have a good read on that. But an initiative has to, leadership has to be there. There needs to be courage, And there has to be a commitment to somebody being proactive in bringing people together in that very difficult human process of finding common ground over this issue, so that you don't have to stop this project with cost consequences somewhere before you get to the 20-mile, 21 stations. That's my argument, and I thank you for allowing me to outline it to you, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Anthony. Any questions? Mr. Formby.
Dr. Anthony, thank you. And I appreciate your comments, and I think I'm in agreement with most of them.
Okay.
I think the one area that perhaps, or maybe two areas that I have a little bit of a disconnect, and I'll be happy to meet with you and discuss it.
Sure.
First, addressing the date. The reason for the 2017 date, whether it was June or February or March, was to address the point that you made about possibly going back to the legislature and getting a GET extension. Because what the FTA made very clear to us, and unfortunately they made it clear to us after they wrote the June 6th letter, was that there were different ways we could approach the recovery plan. And they made it very clear to us that you can do a financial recovery plan, which means you come to us and you say, we're committed to the 20 miles, 21 stations. We're not going to descope this project, and this is how we're going to find the money to do it. And if we convince them that we have the revenue stream to do that, then they can sign off on that recovery plan and say, go build your project just as you designed. Secondly, you can do a descoping, and you can say we're going to defer stations so that we can get the guideway further and make it a more functional system. And that has implications to ridership and cost, and that's what HART and Sam, his team, are looking at right now, are all of those kinds of scenarios. And then lastly, they said you can do a combination of those. You can do a financial recovery plan combined with a descoping and value engineering plan. And so the reason for 2017 was just to say we would like to know if there's going to be a bill in the legislature. Preferably, we would like to know that it's a bill that's going to cross over. But at least we'd want to know that there's a bill in the legislature that may be either the full answer or a partial answer, and we don't know yet. And we have been working on the P3 component. And I will say that there is a group that's working this, and we're working together. So Board Member Lee has been very active with Chair Martin on the P3 side. I've been active with the mayor on the P3 side, and we're talking. And council has been coming to our P3 meetings, and we've been communicating with them. So I understand the need to work together as a team, because we can only produce one recovery plan. That point is absolutely valid. But I just wanted to make sure that you understood that there's a financial recovery plan, a descoping value engineering plan, or a combination. And the last point I wanted to make is current law, city law, does not allow us to use city funds to construct rail. So to the extent that you call upon the mayor to find, I believe you said $400 million, just as illustrative, he can't do that without changing the law, and that requires council. So right now the law says you are constrained to using state funds, which is GET, federal funds, or private funds. So that's the challenge, and it's an enormous challenge to do in a short period of time. And I, you know, Board Member Lee and I, Chair Hanabusa, these are things we talk about all the time. How do we bring everybody together to do something that builds 20 miles, 21 stations, and get the FTA's approval?
Let me briefly respond to that. We are closer together than I thought. And my purpose in coming here is to do what I think transparency intends. Mm-hmm. That is, you do your homework on my part, as much of it as you can do. You make the best case that you can. And why do you make it? And I think the reason why I want to make this the case that I have made in outline is I want to draw someone from the board out so that you respond as you have, Mr. Formby, so that you can assure me, and in assuring me, assure the larger public that there are efforts being made in disparate parts of this project to bring people together to find common ground. I think that is important to be conveyed to the public. That's one of the reasons why you adhere to and espouse the idea of transparency. But there is an additional reason, and I would like to speak to that very, very briefly. The additional reading is this. The additional points that I want to make are as follows. One, I think you have to keep in mind, and I am being deliberately understated here, and I don't mean to disparage the board or the CEO or HART, but my read is that your standing in terms of public opinion support for this project has, I won't say calamitously, but it has substantially gone down. You are not where you were when you faced the EV case and the subsequent developments from that. That is a huge disadvantage for people like me in the public. If we were to do what Board Member Lee was suggesting to me at the last board meeting, that people like me in the public should go to the legislature and say, hey, you guys, you got a kokua here. We can't do that. It don't make sense, because your communications, your branding, your messaging system is not in good shape. And I think you have to face that. If you're going to, eventually you might need public support in the way that was outlined by Board Member Lee at the last meeting. But in order to do that, you've got to fix your messaging system, which is not in good shape. So I hope that helps, because I'm here as a member of the public, taking advantage of the privileges you afford people like us to speak to this issue in a way that is reasonable, that's born of good sense, and is the result of doing at least as much homework as we can reasonably be expected to do. So I'm relieved by what you have to say, and I hope that the board will continue to be open-minded and continue to disclose to us where it is that these discussions are going with respect to finding the money that is needed to carry this project forward to what it was intended to be. Thank you.
Yeah, and Dr. Anthony, thank you for that. And I agree with you. By you coming here and raising these issues, we have these discussions and we educate the public. So thank you.
Okay, good.
Thank you very much. Any other questions or comments for Dr. Anthony? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
You're very welcome. Item 9 is change orders. First one is deferral of guideway lighting. Mike Yoshida. And HNTB design management costs.
Chair Hanabusa, Sam Carnaggio again, Project Director. Our lead for this area, Chris Takashigi, had another meeting with the Stadium Authority. And so I'm just going to give a quick overview, and then these two gentlemen will get into the details. We have two change orders here. One has to do with the deferral of lighting for the guideway. When the guideway was constructed, there was a lighting system that went along there, and since then the code has changed. That's okay. The code has changed and given us an opportunity to re-look at the requirements for lighting along there. Another concern is that with the lighting that we had provided, it could impact the environment along the alignment and some of the neighborhoods. So we have an opportunity to go back, comply with a code that is more friendly to us, allowing us to use ambient lighting as part of the requirement for the lighting for the guideway. You'll see that that item is a credit there. It's taken some time. I should point out also that at this time that these two gentlemen, even though they worked on the project, they worked in different capacities, and they weren't the original project managers. And so they're picking up changes that were actually initiated back probably 2 years ago. The second change that we have has to do with the designer for the design-build contract. As you know, the design-build contract is with Kiewit, and their designer is HNTB, a national, probably international firm of some esteem. And at the time, again, back probably 2012, there were a number of changes that were done on this project, and the design changes were such that each one was marked up in such a way that there were additional costs on each of the changes. The project managers at that time thought that it was unfair for these to be calculated individually when you had the same group of people managing this at the upper level. So after trying repeatedly to negotiate it, what they did was agree to disagree and back out the design management costs. The design costs were negotiated and completed, but the design management costs themselves were taken out at a higher level. Our team has gone back since then, negotiated through these changes, and actually you'll see a substantial reduction in what the original costs were. So I would like to introduce Mike Yoshida, who is now the project manager for the WOOF contract and the KHG contract. And assisting him is going to be Jim Neal, who is one of our contracts people that worked out in the field. At the time, Jim worked for another firm, but we've had him come back to help on a number of change orders that we've had. Okay, Mike?
Thanks, Sam. Good afternoon, Chair Hanabusa and members of the board. Dan. As Sam mentioned, my name is Mike Yoshida. I'm the project manager for the Wolf and Kamehameha Guideways. Sitting next to me is Jim Neal, excuse me. Jim is a change analyst and will help me with the presentation on the HNTB changes. So this first change order is a deferral of guideway walkway lighting. The change order amounts to a $2.4 million credit for Wolf and a $1.5 million credit for KHG. Both credits have been agreed to by both HART and Kiewit. The guideway emergency walkway lighting was a requirement of the National Fire Protection Association, NFPA code, at the time of the guideway design and bid in 2009. The 2007 edition of NFPA 130 stipulated walkway lighting for all underground, enclosed, and elevated guideways. As part of this initial design requirement, HART agreed to provide 32-watt fluorescent lamps attached to the sound barriers at 40-foot increments. In 2010, NFPA changed their requirement and revised the walkway lighting to apply only to underground and enclosed trainways. In addition, it allowed the incorporation of ambient lighting in the calculation to meet minimum lighting levels. The resultant deferral results in a credit to HART of a little over $4 million, of which the entire amount will be reallocated to construction contingency. Prior to full service, HART will do testing of the guideway, in situ testing of the guideway lighting, and determine whether or not additional lights will be necessary. And if so, what HART will do is provide photovoltaic-powered LED lights for those parts of the walkway that have insufficient lighting. This is a section of the guideway that shows you where our walkway, emergency walkway is. It's between the two trains. And the lights that were designed in the past are mounted to the sound walls, which are on both sides of the guideway. That ends my presentation on the deferred guideway lighting.
So, Vice Chair Kim.
So the question I got is, do you know what the city and county on what year they adopted the NFPA that they're using currently? Because on the NEC, they're at a 2008 code book, and they're currently trying to adopt the 2014. But on the NFPA side, what does the city adopt?
When did the city adopt it?
No, what year book is the NFPA being used by the city and county?
The current year, I'm not sure of. The one that had changed the guideway lighting was 2010.
Okay, because even though the code books change and updates every 3 years and things, the city doesn't adopt necessarily the current year. So when they're doing inspections, they're inspecting based upon the older code book.
And it's our understanding that 2010 has been adopted by the city. They may have adopted even a later version.
Okay.
Than 20,
Second question.
I believe they're up to 2013 now.
Okay, so second question I have is on the credit. While credit is always good, is this just for light fixtures only that the credit is, or is it for the whole installation of the conduits, wiring, and everything?
Yes, it's for everything.
Okay.
Light fixtures and conduits.
So has an analysis been done that, I don't mind changing the light fixtures and deciding that, you know, we need to be more environmentally friendly and all, and get better lighting coverages and things, we can do less lighting, but did you guys do a cost where, as opposed to installing the conduit and wiring now, as opposed to doing it at a later date when it could cost a lot more?
Well,
and then not only that, you're exposing piping as opposed to it being buried in the concrete and hidden.
Yes, that's a good point. And actually, we chose to eliminate the conduit because our final lighting will be the photovoltaics, which basically will eliminate a lot of the conduit. We won't be needing any conduits with photovoltaics. And we'll be using LED lightings as part of that system altogether. So we're looking at it as a package design, if you will.
So that's on the elevator side, but in the tunnel, I know the tunnel, there's only, I believe, only one station that maybe has a tunnel. But on the tunnel side, how do you use the PV and not use conduit when you're underneath?
The tunnel that you're talking about, I believe, is at LCC.
Correct.
And it's a pedestrian-only tunnel. It takes you from the station entrance to the platform itself. What we're talking about here is guideway lighting.
So the other one underneath?
The other one
still
is
has-
already, the other lighting is already built into the station design, and that will be a more conventional lighting, if you will.
Okay.
Okay.
Yes, thank you.
Any other question, members? Mr. Formby.
Thank you, Chair. When I look at the profile, I know it shows, and perhaps it's just illustrative, but it shows the walkway lighting on just one of the walls. And yet the emergency walkway is in the middle. So is it on both sides or one side only?
Yes, it's on both sides.
It's on both sides. And then the profile of that lighting, is that something that is observable for if you're down at street level or if you're at the same level? I would imagine if you're in a condo and the guideway comes down in front of your condo, you're going to be able to see the lighting. Can you tell us from street level, would you be able to see the white lights on the guideway up ahead, or is it below the wall?
No, Director, it would not be visible from street level. If it goes next to a condo and you're up above, Obviously, you will be able to see that, but it'll be directed toward the walkway itself.
So it is directional?
Yes.
Okay. All right, very good, thank you.
Yes.
Just question, so looking at the photovoltaics and the lighting, you guys looked at the design already on what type you guys are looking at? The reason is some of them, the photovoltaic side sticks above, right, the rail area. So
Yes.
from the street, you would be able to see part of that fixture every 40 feet or whatever you decide the span is, you'll see these little pop-ups of a PV.
Well, we haven't selected a final fixture yet, but preliminarily, we looked at a fixture that would be mounted near or onto the walkway itself, and it'll have a photovoltaic panel built in up above with lights attached to the pole, but further down, so it wouldn't be visible from the street, not unless you're much, much further away, but it still would be directional toward the
Oh,
walkway
and then be
itself.
on the walkway itself then,
Yeah,
so it's
that-
not, it
that's-
wouldn't be like that then?
It
on the
would
side.
not be like this.
Oh,
This is
okay.
the current design.
Okay.
Any other questions? Thank you very much, Mike. The next change order?
Want a motion?
Oh, well, I was going to take them both at the same time. Okay.
Can we?
Members, any questions about this? Can we have, well, since we're going to take action, any member of the public want to speak on this? Not? Members, may we have a motion on the approval of, this is actually a credit. So the credit change order, motion to accept?
So moved.
So move, second?
Second.
Second? Any discussion? If not, do we have unanimous consent? We have unanimous consent. Thank you, members. The next change order. HNTB, you again, Mike. Technical Design Management.
Yes, this is a second change order, and it is for HNTB Technical Design Management. HNTB is the design arm of Kiewit, and additional management costs were incurred from August 25th, 2012 to March 31st, 2015 for Wolf, and April 30th, 2015 for KHG. The change is an add and is in the amount of $4.5 million for Wolf and $3.8 million for Kamehameha. And then both changes have been agreed to by HART and Kiewit. Some of the examples of additional and changed designs are shown in the next two slides. These were delays in utility and third-party agreements, right of entry agreements. There were guideway changes due to station loading, mass grading at Ho'opili Station, and actually the relocation of Ho'opili Station itself. The basis of this change order is for technical design management for work performed on both Wolf and KHG contracts. HNTB's design management costs were expressly excluded from previous change orders due to overlapping changes occurring at the same time period. This allowed HART to review the extended design management effort after completion and negotiate a reasonable compensation for this item.
That compensation allowed us to save approximately 38%, roughly $5 million, from the numbers that Kiewit recently requested versus what we thought the numbers should be. So I'm going to go through Wolf real quick, and then I'll go through KHG as well. When we looked at this initially, there was a number of different ways that we could come up with a number, but we went back to the base contract and said what was in their base contract, what was in their bid for their design management and their design. And then we progressed that forward through the change orders that were already authorized. And that got us to the August 2012 date, the beginning of the AIS suspension period, that 13-month period. And so at that point, we said the best thing we could do is look at the level of effort next that takes us through the period from August 2012 to the final design of March and April of 2015. So in doing that, we identified what they were compensated initially in the change order and the original contract. And we looked at the level of effort next and said the level of effort is consistent with the needs of the project. There were significant changes that were identified in the change orders. There were approximately, in the two contracts alone, there were about 64 change orders issued at that time. And within that, individually, it adds up to about 244 changes to the design program under Kiewit. So when we looked at that, we said there was additional work and change design work that were beyond their control. We paid them for the design work. So now what you see here is our methodology for that change. We identified that, again, in the initial contract, in the change orders up to August 12th, they were paid approximately $6,700 a day. And if we continue that through the end of the contract, then we come up with a number of about $3.9 million initially. Now, I want to note here that we took out the 13-month AIS suspension period. We felt they should have continued design through that period. They should not have stopped. And therefore, the total duration would have been shorter. So then looking at the same thing for KHG, and I'll come back to the total values. So looking at the same thing for the KHG contract, same basis, we went back to the original contract, the change orders were authorized up to the AIS suspension period, and we saw that they were paid approximately $5,400 a day. So we carried that forward. We carried that forward again through the end of design period for KHG, and we took out the 13-month AIS suspension period. Then through negotiations with Kiewit, they felt that, and we felt, that there was some work going on through the AIS suspension period that was compensable. So we agreed to, they offered the same dollar value per day that we identified and said, what if we took 20% of that number through this 13-month period? We felt that was very fair and reasonable. There was work effort going on. We have change orders where we directed them to do the work. So that added about $1 million on to the total. And so now that total brings us up to about $8.3 million for both projects. And that is our number based on our estimates level of effort. Any questions?
Yeah.
Members, any questions?
Yeah, I got a
yes.
question.
Mr. Hong.
You know, I thought we revisited this before and we voted for the change order payments. And some of these, you know, I see here, it's just pure, poor design, not anything related to delays. I mean, station loading, guideway structural modifications, this should all have been done in the original design.
Do you have a response to Mr. Hong?
We did look at a number of those items where we did not pay for the redesign of certain things. There were other areas where we felt like they were paid for the design that was authorized in a prior change order contract. We only went forward and looked at the technical design management and looked at where were they authorized a change order for the design. So we carried it forward the same methodology at that time. But I agree with you, there were some areas, but that's excluded from this.
Yeah, that's a problem I have is that, you know, had this been designed correctly, we wouldn't be revisiting some of this redesign work.
We took out a number of things that they then credited back to in their requests. Through the negotiations, we were able to take a number of those things out of it. For instance, they started at about $16.1 million in their request as a combination for both KHG and Wolf. We were able to get that down to about $13 million. We still weren't happy with it, and they came down to roughly 10. In the end, we negotiated down to about 8.3. So that's roughly 44% of where we started.
No, you folks have done a great job renegotiating the prices, but I think we should have been on top of this and made sure we had correct designs, proper designs, structurally designed correctly.
Yeah, can I give some clarification on your question? The station loading had changed. We did have initially station loads that were provided to the contractor. Those station loads were preliminary. The stations were not yet designed at the time of the bids for the guideway. The station loads had changed because of our canopy designs, and the canopies were finalized a year or more after the guideway had started. The wind loads on the new canopy had caused overturning moments on the platform, which in turn had affected the hammerheads and in turn affected the shafts and the foundations. So I know it would have been nice to have final designs at the time of the guideways were bid, but we just didn't have that information at the time.
My next question would be, how much more is it going to cost us for this redesign work in construction costs?
For Wolf, we're done with our design work. All of that has been incorporated on all of the stations, and actually that has extended into the Kamehameha Guideway as well.
Weren't these structural components designed in the original station bids that were taken out when you folks rebid the stations?
You're talking about
Yeah, wasn't the structural work in the original station designs?
Yes, they were in the original station designs. But the station designs were not finalized until well after the guideway was bid and went out for construction.
If I may interject, you know, one of the things that we, the board, have, especially recently, have had difficulty with is how you, the staff, present us with change orders. Now, by contrast, when Mr. Moore does it, he has tons of paper, and we're also briefed ahead of time, and we get to ask our questions about the legal ramifications of what has happened, and I think that's what Mr. Hong is getting at. I would recommend, members, that you go back and you do the same thing. In other words, before you come to the board on these specific types of change orders, especially with Kiewit, where you're talking about 2012, you're talking about all these different things, it is very difficult for members of this board to go and say, okay, we're going to authorize another $8 million or whatever else, when we have definite questions about where did this happen, especially when you're talking about a time frame, August 2012 to March or April 2015. I don't think that it's fair to ask us to approve these change orders with the type of information you're providing us with slides and saying, okay, this is what happened, because that doesn't answer our questions. So members, what I would propose is that we defer this until they have had the opportunity to go back and to look at and to answer the questions such as what Mr. Hong is raising. This is not the way we want to see change orders presented to this board, especially for that amount of money. Mr. Formby.
Yeah, Chair, and gentlemen, I'll agree. You know, if it was solely a matter of us as board members saying that implicitly we trust you, we trust the analysis that you did, and we're going to prove it, that would be one thing, but that's not our obligation. And so when I look at the issues that are listed that I guess are the basis for the claims, I just don't know enough about the delays versus the HDOT changes to understand how a delay impacted the change order amount versus a change in scope of work or a change in specification. And when I read this earlier, I couldn't discern a nexus between these issues and the bottom line. And I think that's what's missing. And in the past, we have been offered an opportunity to come in and get briefed. And I think we need that opportunity to ask questions and be briefed. Did we get that this time?
Yes, twice.
On this change order?
Yeah, yes. And as a matter of fact, we were very disappointed both you and Chair Hanabusa did not respond to that invitation.
Yeah.
Because we recognize how complex this issue is, and we're looking for, John Felix and Terrence Lee accepted our offer, and we met with them separately earlier in the week.
Well, then I must have missed it.
We had asked Cindy to extend a third offer to you late last night, because we knew that you were going to have difficulty understanding the full width and breadth of this because of the complexity. And we had assumed that obviously you didn't have time for us, but we
No,
were hoping.
it actually wasn't that. I mean, and I would also say this, that I have a telephone. And so if you send me emails, I mean, I right now literally get about 350 to 400 emails a day, and I'm at my desk about 30 minutes a day. So I have a telephone, and you can call me and tell me, board member, maybe you didn't see the email, but we have a very important change order coming up, and we'd like to brief you, and would you make yourself available? And if I'm not available, I'll say no, but at least I would know that you're offering this service to us. So I'll take the hit on that. If you tried 2 times and the chair and I did not reply, I can guarantee you it's not because we ignored it, it's because we didn't see it. So I'll take that on, and I would like to meet with you guys and receive the information.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yes, and as you know, that's been our standard practice, so and is this an $8 million change order, or is this a $1 million change order from a credit of 4.5 and a 3.8 cost? And this is in your letter. I thought it was an $8 million change order.
It is an
So
$8
you said
million.
approve the bilateral contract change order in the credit amounts of 4.517, this is for Wolf, and 3.810 for Kamehameha Highway.
That's your guys' cover letter that
That's
you
your
have
cover
over here.
letter.
It says credit.
I have not seen that letter, I'm sorry.
Oh.
July 28, 2016.
I have not seen that letter.
Well,
It should be in the word credit shouldn't be there, it should be in the amounts of.
Yes.
Yes.
You're right, and that was an error.
that is an error, right? So
Yes, it is.
if we didn't respond to you, we apologize, but as you know, our history has been that we are usually there. I don't remember this one, but we will defer anyway. Yes, Mr.
Yeah,
Hall.
just one more question, you know. Us having the knowledge and the taxpayers that are paying for this project not having the knowledge is a big difference. The taxpayers need to know what's going on, and they need the details. We can make the decisions from the information you folks give us, and you folks can give us good information. But the taxpayers also want answers. And so you need to share those answers with the taxpayers also. Thank you.
And it is confusing when you're talking about credits, and you're not talking about credits.
I can understand. Again, my apologies.
Sam, do you wish to say, well, let me get,
I just,
Lee.
because I did have the benefit of the briefing before the hearing today, I just wanted to actually commend you guys, because I asked a lot of questions and you answered them to my satisfaction. So, you know, but I understand the problem with the chair and member Formby, because they didn't have the benefit of asking the same types of questions as well as member Hong. So, but I didn't want you guys just to get beat up, you know, because I did appreciate you answering the questions, and it was to my satisfaction.
So can I ask a question in response to that? Because this came up last time. So when you do the briefings to board members, and I understand 2 of you attended, then do you modify the presentation so that where they had a lack of knowledge or understanding and it's presented to the public now benefits from the questions that they asked and the knowledge that they gained?
That's true, Director Formby. Without casting the wrong impression, Chair Hanabusa usually has a comment or 2 that we incorporate, and it makes the presentation better because she's looking at it with outside eyes where we're working and maybe we don't see it, we have an understanding. So it's always helpful for board members to view it and comment on it, and it makes a I think, for a better presentation for the public.
Yeah, and that's Board Member Hong's point, and I appreciate you making that point, Buzzy. And I apologize for missing those emails. Really, I would like to have learned more about this before, so I'll take that hit and look forward to getting together with you guys.
I will also commit to taking a responsibility to make sure that both of you are contacted. If we don't hear back from you, we'll know that there's a good reason why not.
Thank you.
So I'll take that responsibility. But I do want to assure you, we do have a lot of backup, and you're right, Chair Hanabusa, we use John Moore as an example of the expectations that you have as far as the detail that you all get into when we go into it. I also wanted to assure you that both Member Felix and Member Lee did question us on a number of items there, and there was an interaction. So we'll do better next time.
We appreciate it. And, you know, as you all know, there's a lot of rumbling going on that Kiewit has a whole stack of change orders. And people have been asking us about the Kiewit change orders. So I think it's incumbent upon us to understand the basis, and so that when these change orders start to come in, and one of the issues that I will tell you up front is I just want to know why it's taken so long. You know, why, when you have something 2012 and you're bringing it to us now, you know, I'd like to have that explanation, which you can provide me when we do meet on this. But with members, with all of your approval, I'm going to ask that this matter be deferred, giving members who do want to avail themselves of further explanation the opportunity. So our apologies to you, but we just can't, I can't vote it, and I'm thankful that the rest of the board is also going to defer on this. Thank you very much.
We understand. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Now, members, I am very concerned about the fact that we may be losing, we're going to lose quorum? Okay, so I guess we would then have to, well, I was going to defer anyway to the next meeting, items 10 to 13, which is our pigs. I guess the annual report we can also defer. Do we have to do the city council resolution? And if we do, I may ask Mr. Hong to please stay. But do we need to do that? That's Jesse Suki. Do we need to do that right away? We have to do it today? Buzzy, can you give us a little bit more time? We're going to have to go into executive session for this, as I understand it. So items 10 to 14 will be deferred, and we'll take item 15, which is the council approval for acquisition, to suspend the approval for acquisition. And we do need to go into executive session for this, Jesse?
We have some general issues we can discuss in the open meeting, but if there are follow-up legal questions, the last time we had some legal questions to talk about in executive session, then you might decide you want to go into executive session.
Okay, so why don't we go to item number 15. So Cindy, 10 to 14 deferred. Number 15 is Honolulu City Council Resolution 16-169, establishing a council policy to suspend all council approvals for acquisition of real property by HART for Honolulu's Honolulu's rail project pending the FTA approval of a recovery plan. And just so that we're clear, this board did pass a resolution which sort of addressed this itself, correct, Jesse?
It was an executive session, and it wasn't done on the record.
Okay.
So I just wanted to go over our understanding to be sure that we understand. And what I did was to help out with the discussion was do a side-by-side comparison.
Okay.
So really what we're asking the board are two questions. One is about the resolution. Will the board allow HART, Dan, to go and testify before council when the resolution comes up? And the second issue we're asking is, from my shop's perspective as the acquisition agents, did we get your instruction correctly? And you might want to change it given AGS and the current status of the project.
I'll just quickly mention that the resolution was introduced by Councilmember Kobayashi to restrict our actions. There is some ambiguity, and given the board's practice to give direction to staff to testify, or board members, only after such time as the board has given specific vote on the matter. Jesse and Joyce have put together this comparison, so you can, if we're called upon to testify, I can actually go and make the modifications that we'd recommend.
Okay. Go ahead, Jesse.
So in the meeting with the board in executive session on June 16th, this is what we understood the board's direction to be.
Wait a minute, wait a minute. Were we in executive session? So, Lisa, what do we do now? This is executive session information. But I guess it's moot now because if you made it into this, this chart.
Because I'm not going to talk about the legal issues we discussed. I'm just going to talk about the direction that wasn't, it's not the legal.
Yes, that's fine. As long as you don't talk about the legal advice that we gave to the board, it should be okay.
The risk or liabilities, I'm not talking about that.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. So the direction was to process all transactions before Middle Street Station, and then beyond Middle Street Station, no new eminent domain actions filed in court, and then continue only with transactions that have been agreed to with the landowner in writing and where the landowner is amenable to proceeding. And any eminent domain matters already filed in court, we should continue and complete those. And that was a nuance. It gave us the ability to proceed with the transactions that made sense, minimizing the risk for the project, and also moving forward with landowners who want to complete the transaction. Council's resolution is a bit more strict. Council is urging the board to suspend all eminent domain, to suspend real property acquisitions, suspend taking possession of property. It says that council will not approve any further real property acquisitions, and it will object to all proposed acquisitions. However, it says it does not negate or reverse any prior condemnation authorizations. So these are the resolve sections of the resolution. So when you read the resolve sections, which is really the authority for the resolution, it says what it says. But when you look at the whereas, there might be a little bit more context on the intent, but it's not clear in some areas. For example, under the whereas clause 4, it talks about how HART is thinking about stopping at Middle Street. So this might suggest that the resolution is only talking about activity after Middle Street, but it's not clear. And then on the whereas clause 8, the resolution says that the city, whereas under section 17-103(2)B of the revised charter, City and County of Honolulu 1973 provides for city council approval or rejection of any proposal from HART for the acquisition of real property or any interest therein by eminent domain, purchase, lease, or otherwise. That would be a departure from how HART has operated. We do need under the charter, and this is not a actual word-for-word citation from the charter, it's an interpretation. And the way we've been operating is that we need permission for eminent domain from council, but not for purchase and lease. So this would be a slight change in policy, so I'm not sure if HART would want to testify on that or get some clarity. It also talks about under section 10 of the whereas that it seems like the purpose of this is to minimize disruption of commercial businesses, but as the acquisition team, on the ground working on these acquisitions, we're taking a lot of portions and slivers of property. There might be a very short-term impact because in some cases we may need to move parking stalls or modify a structure because we're doing a partial taking, and we pay for all of that if that's our impact. But there's no long-term impacts from the actual taking of the property to the commercial business. And if they are impacted to the degree where they can no longer conduct their business, we're responsible for relocation, and so we would relocate the business. So I'm not sure if there's an understanding here about what happens at the acquisition level of the transaction. Now, this is separate from construction impacts or future project impacts, but acquisition per se doesn't really cause too many impacts. And even if you would argue that it does cause impacts, I think the nuanced approach that the board has, which is we should at least complete the transactions that are executed where the landowner wants to proceed, we should at least finish those because they're willing and ready. So maybe that's something we want to convey to council. One thing I wanted to share with the board as you consider what to do about the resol or your own direction, if you feel like you might want to nuance it or amend it a bit, there's some challenges that we've been facing with the direction that we've gotten. So some landowners want to complete transactions, and HART would do so, but because we don't have any signed agreements with them, we can't. So, we had a couple of landowners call us up and say, hey, aren't we going to sign these agreements? Aren't we going to get paid? You've been working with us for 2 years, and we can't proceed. So, we have to tell them, we're holding off for now. We have these transactions take a long time. A lot of them are complicated. For whatever reason, the project decided early on that it wouldn't acquire more than it exactly needed. Some of that has to do with FTA requirements. Some of it has to do with the city wasn't willing to spend local funds on more than what it needed for the project. So it makes the transactions complicated. Appraisals, for example, is much easier to appraise an entire parcel than a sliver of a parcel. And some of the cost to cure work that I talked about, if we're moving parking stalls or taking a portion of a building. So these transactions take a long time to complete. And I'll give you an example. We just closed on a partial take, $200,000. It's not a big parcel. That transaction started in 2014. And there was nothing unique about it. It was just that a Hui owned the property. And a lot of these properties are owned by Hui's family or corporations, different entities. And getting them all at the same table to talk about how to proceed with the transaction took a long time. But we finally closed, but it took since 2014. Stopping negotiation has impeded some relationships. Folks, we in these relationships with them, and then we stopped. It's not helpful. And one concern that we're talking about was the recovery options that we're going through. If we stop, like council wants us to just stop with all acquisitions past Middle Street, that may foreclose some options for how we deal with the FTA's desire in the recovery response to the mayor that we figure out how to pay for the whole thing. So I think that they want us to, at some point, build the whole thing. And if we're not acquiring property before we get there, it's a day-to-day delay and construction cost. And then, so 39 of the TMKs we have in city center are currently on hold, and that we're not working on. And so, just for the board's consideration, so those 2 points. One is, did we get the board's direction correct? And is that something you want to affirm or leave a change? And then the second thing we're asking for is, should Dan or someone from HART go and testify on this issue if called upon for the resolution? One more issue. Thank you, Morris. Relocation. So these transactions have started in CCGS, that's the city center. And once we notify landowners that we're going to be acquiring or possibly requiring the property, the tenants and the landowner have certain rights under the Uniform Relocation Act. And so we need to relocate them if they qualify. So if the desire by council is to save taxpayer money by stopping with acquisition, that doesn't mean we're saving on the side of relocation, because if there's impacts and we've notified them and they qualify, then we have to go through that process anyway, and that's what they're entitled to, the Uniform Relocation Act. So there's also that element.
Done? Members,
Yes.
Any questions?
So, Jesse, just so I understand, so it sounds to me like you're suggesting it would be a good idea to have Dan or yourself or somebody go before the council and testify on this resolution to better educate the council as to the impacts of their proposed resolution, so that they make an informed decision before deciding whether to pass it or not.
I think if the board allowed that, we'd probably meet with them one-on-one and, you know, help them understand what it's like on the ground. You know, other projects, they do, one of the criticisms of this project has been, why did you acquire all the land beforehand? Well, now's a good time to continue with that because we're pausing, but, you know, we're still going down that corridor, so corridor preservation.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
Is this
Yes.
resolution up on the next agenda?
So while we respected the policy of the board and not discussed the policy issues in this resolution, we have talked to, this measure has been, let me see, referred to the Executive Matters Committee, and they have not scheduled it yet, but potentially their upcoming meeting is on August 22nd, so it could be heard as soon as that, and should they move forward, it would be before the council in September. So these, in addition to the committee chairperson, we would request your permission, not just with all council members as well, but to speak with the introducer.
My understanding, the chair doesn't support this.
Based on our latest meeting with him, he deferred to the introducer of the measure, Councilmember Kobayashi.
Any other questions? I have a couple of comments. One is that this, I understand the whereases, but in the resolution, it's the be it resolved that really controls.
Yes.
And the be it resolved basically prohibits the actions until a recovery plan is finalized. So arguably, if we are looking at the recent letter from the FDA, we are going to have something pretty well finalized by the end of the year, probably sooner than that. And they're asking for a meeting in end of August in San Francisco. And also at that time, if you heard Sam testify, that we're looking at having something maybe not final, but tangible for them to agree in principle. And then we have to go back in September, and we have to the end of the year to do it. So we're really talking about a situation to the end of the year. When we, the board, discussed what you have up there, it was because of the fact that we are dealing with the issue of the whole, oh, if you go, I lose my quorum and my vote. Oh, well, it's moot now because we don't have enough, but we can continue with the discussion. So the problem that I see is that when I recall that the board instructed you on this was because we wanted to show that when we were doing the recovery plan that we were acting in good faith. So we didn't want to appear like we were just continuing to spend money when there was a good possibility that we may not be able to get there. And that was the reason why we said this. I mean, I understand that the prudent thing would have been, you should have acquired all the land before. But the fact is, you didn't. HART didn't. So we are dealt the cards that we are dealing with right now. We didn't acquire the land. So now that we're looking at a situation where we are constrained by funds, what does this board do? And that's why, given the time frame, the board's position, I believe, was, hey, look, don't push anything that hasn't gone forward, but we thought that we gave you sufficient flexibility to finish off the transactions that you've already started.
I do appreciate the board's more nuanced approach. The council's direction would probably be problematic.
So maybe, though we don't have the board here, maybe the sentiment, since it's now public, is when you go to city council, you can explain to them that the board had considered this itself. So it's not like, you know, we're not considering there's how they want to be accountable to the public. We were considering that. So as a result, maybe because this is what we acted on and we gave you instructions on, that this should be, this meaning what you have there, should be the position of the board. And hopefully city council will see that the board had thought about this, and it was our decision to come up with these parameters so that it doesn't look like we're ignoring the facts here. And their resolution is to a recovery plan, which is to the end of the year, arguably anyway. So maybe it's some kind of compromise that can be reached. And unfortunately, since Buzzy's left, we don't have the votes to instruct you to do that. But I think that the fact is that the board did take this action. You have at least something that you can share with council, that this has been the position of the board, that the board thought about this before they came up with their resolution, because we are concerned about how public perception is on this issue as well.
Chair, if I may say that if we don't have the vote, maybe to advocate on behalf of a particular position, that we could take Director Lee's suggestion and use this as an educational opportunity to share what the implications would be. So we would, with your leave, we would be meeting one-on-one with council members more informationally than as an advocate at this point.
I think that the resolution that we passed as a board, and Lisa can correct me, when we said that you are to come to the board for approval to take a formal position of the board, one of the things that we did say was if it was a position to clarify, that you are within the rights to clarify. Lisa, isn't that correct? And that resolution that we passed about not the official position of the board, but if it's something that the board has stated, then Dan and whoever else is appearing on behalf of HART can proceed and clarify the position or answer questions or to educate. I think it falls within that purview.
My recollection, Lisa Hirhart, Deputy Corporation Counsel, my recollection is that you gave Dan and HART permission to testify about factual matters.
Right.
But anything policy related would need to come before the board.
Right. So the question, though, but they can always go in and answer questions.
Yes.
So if it's on an issue, for example, of how this would affect what Jesse and Morris does, they can answer those questions.
Sure,
that's within the confine. I think it's also factual that the board did give instructions, and that's factual. So you can, I don't see why that would be in violation of our resolution, that you could share with the city council that the board, HART board, had actually considered all of this, and this is how we did it. We came up with it, and that you can live within those confines. You know, I agree, it would be a perfect world if you guys had done it before, but you didn't do it before. So now we are in this situation, and we have to make the best of it, I think. Members, are we in agreement on that?
Yes.
So does that give you clarification and direction as to what you guys can do with them?
This is very helpful because we've been sharing this with landowners, of course. And,
right.
So this is helpful to go over it, and we can work within the parameters of the board.
And I think if City Council recognizes that we have actually considered this ourselves, and this is how we've come to live with it, they may find that to be acceptable and adopt that position as well, if they proceed to go ahead. Because the real thing is, this is to the end of the year, arguably. We got to come up with a recovery plan, and there's sunsets by the recovery plan. Okay? Thank you very much. I think we are without without any quorum, members, so we will have to adjourn. So with that, right, Cindy? I don't have quorum, right? So we will adjourn, members. Thank you very much, and we will meet again on the 8th at 8:30. So everyone, please put that in your calendar. Thank you.